Have you ever found yourself maybe, caught in the middle of a really busy day and you just suddenly stop and ask, who am I really? Like, is there more to me than just my job or my role as a parent or a partner? All these labels.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe that other big one, why does life sometimes feel so heavy? Why do we suffer? Why is there loss?
Exactly. And these aren't just like abstract philosophical questions you find in old books, are they?
Not at all. They feel incredibly urgent sometimes.
Yeah, they're like living inquiries that really shape our everyday happiness, our peace of mind, how we actually get through the world.
You've hit on something really fundamental there. It's universal. Every single one of us, at some point, we wrestle with these deep questions.
We're all looking for meaning, trying to figure out our place.
Right. And ultimately searching for a way to experience maybe a bit less suffering and hopefully cultivate more genuine joy, lasting peace.
And that right there is the journey we're starting today. So welcome everyone to the deep dive. Our mission today is, it's to give you a kind of shortcut. A way to get well informed about the incredible wisdom packed into Indian philosophy.
Mm-hmm. And it's often misunderstood, isn't it? People think it's going to be super complex or inaccessible.
Right. But this isn't about memorizing ancient texts or, getting bogged down in complicated Sanskrit terms. Definitely not.
No. It's more about pulling out the really potent, practical nuggets of knowledge. The insights that can genuinely help you navigate modern life.
Yeah, with more clarity, maybe more resilience when things get tough.
And what's really remarkable and honestly quite refreshing about these Indian thinkers is that philosophy for them wasn't some ivory tower thing, separate from the messiness of everyday life.
Right, it wasn't just academic.
Quite the opposite. From the very beginning, Indian philosophy was intensely practical, always about how to live.
How to live better.
How to suffer less, basically. How to find deeper meaning. How to get to a real lasting sense of peace. It's fundamentally a spiritual practice, a guide for living, much more than just studying ideas.
That reminds me of this little analogy. Imagine some friends are hiking lost in this really dense jungle, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly they stumble upon this totally bizarre, complex machine, like nothing they've ever seen.
Intriguing.
So one friend, just full of awe, says, "Wow, this must be a gift from the gods. We should worship it."
The devotional approach.
Then another one, maybe a bit more cautious, shouts, No, stay back. It's obviously a trap. It looks dangerous.
A skeptical one.
Exactly. But then a third friend, just genuinely curious, says, "Hang on. Forget worship or fear for a second. How does this thing actually work? What does it do? Can we figure it out? Maybe even use it?"
I see where you're going.
That, kind of in a nutshell, is philosophy, isn't it? Different ways people try to understand life itself, its purpose, how it works, and, crucially, how best to interact with it, whether through devotion or caution or just deep curiosity.
That analogy nails it. It perfectly captures the different approaches. And it leads to a really important point for you listening. When was the last time you really paused and asked yourself, why am I doing all this?
The big why.
Yeah. What's the deeper point of all this striving, this running around, that moment of questioning, that little flicker of curiosity about something more? That's philosophy knocking. It's that very human urge to look beyond the surface.
And here's our promise for this deep dive. By the time we wrap up, you'll have a really solid foundational understanding of the major streams of Indian thought.
But more than just understanding.
Way more. You'll get practical tools, ideas you can actually apply to modern challenges like making tough decisions, handling stress, finding real happiness, navigating tricky relationships.
Get ready for some potential aha moments, those insights that can offer a fresh perspective.
Yeah, a truly empowering way to look at your life. The ancient echoes, seeds of wisdom in the Vedas and Upanishads. So let's do this. Let's travel back, way back, thousands of years. Where do we even begin when we talk about the absolute origins of Indian thought?
Great place to start. To really get Indian philosophy, you absolutely have to go back to the roots,
The Vedas.
The Vedas.
Right.
These are incredibly ancient texts. We're talking maybe 1500 down to 500 BCE. They're the oldest sacred books of India. Think of them as humanity's earliest attempts to articulate, the cosmic order and our place in it all.
So like the first big questions being asked.
Exactly. There are 4 main Vedas.
Right.
The Rig Veda, for example, is this huge collection of hymns, really powerful poetry dedicated to the forces of nature, which they saw as gods or devas.
Like gods for fire and rain.
Precisely. Agni for fire, crucial for rituals. Indra for rain and thunder, vital for agriculture. Then you have the Yajurveda, focusing on the nuts and bolts of rituals. The Samaveda, all about the chants and melodies used in those rituals. And the Atharvaveda, which is more about practical spells, health, and everyday life wisdom.
So a real mix.
Yeah, but the key thing is the Vedas represent those very first glimmers of inquiry. People observing the world, seeing these powerful forces, and trying to understand them, trying to relate to them.
So initially it sounds like the focus was very external, like rituals and ceremonies.
You got it. Things like elaborate fire sacrifices, called yajnas. The main goal seemed very practical, almost transactional.
Transactional? How so?
Well, people were praying for tangible things, right? Material well-being, good harvests, healthy kids, lots of cattle, long life, good health. It was about making life here on Earth prosperous and stable by appeasing these cosmic forces.
Makes sense for an early society.
Absolutely. For centuries, the main focus was on this karma kanda, the path of ritual action. Performing these ceremonies correctly was believed to influence the gods and get you what you wanted, both here and maybe in a good afterlife. A very outward-looking approach.
But then something shifted.
Here's where it gets really interesting. As time went on, generations performed countless rituals, but, a subtle but profound question started bubbling up.
What?
People began to wonder, is this really all there is? Is life just about doing these rituals and chasing temporary comforts?
The deeper yearning.
Exactly, this growing curiosity, this feeling that there must be something more than just the external, the transient, that really set the stage for the deeper philosophy that came next. It was almost like a natural psychological evolution, moving from asking the gods first stuff to asking about the nature of the self and reality itself.
That makes perfect sense. It's like, okay, we've got the external world somewhat figured out maybe, but what about the internal world? What came next after the Vedas? Did things just get more ritualistic, or was there a bigger shift?
A massive shift. And that's where the Upanishads come in. Roughly around 800 to 300 BCE. They represent this profound inward turn. They're often called the very soul of Indian philosophy.
The soul of it. Okay.
See, the Upanishads are philosophical texts that appear right at the end of the Vedic collections. That's why the whole philosophical tradition that flows from them is called Vedanta, Veda plus Anta, literally meaning the end of the Vedas.
So Vedanta means the culmination of the Vedas.
In a philosophical sense, yes. It signifies a radical shift in focus.
Yeah.
Away from just outward ritual towards inner realization and self-knowledge.
Let me try an analogy for you listening. Imagine you've been stuck in that daily grind for years, right? Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat.
The hamster wheel?
Yeah. And then one day, maybe it's a Tuesday, you just stop. You look around your office or your commute and you suddenly ask, is this really it? Who am I underneath this job title, this routine? What actually happens when we die? What is this consciousness I'm experiencing?
That moment of pause.
That moment of stepping off the treadmill and looking inward for the really big answers, that's the spirit of the Upanishads. They turned the focus from appeasing gods to understanding the self.
Beautifully put. And the Upanishads introduced these core concepts that became the bedrock, really, for almost everything that followed in Indian thought. First up is Atman.
Atman. The self.
Yes, but deeper than we usually think of self. Most of us identify with our name, our body, our job, our thoughts, our feelings. All things that change.
Constantly changing, yeah.
The Upanishads ask you to look beyond all that. Atman is your true self, your unchanging inner essence, your soul, if you like. It's described as eternal, unborn, constant, always present underneath all the surface changes. It's the I that witnesses everything else.
Okay, so that's the individual I. What about the big picture? Is there like A universal version of that.
Absolutely. That's Brahman. Brahman is the universal spirit, the ultimate reality, the single underlying truth behind everything in existence. Everything. Think of it as the fundamental consciousness or energy from which the entire universe arises and to which it all returns.
Okay. In an analogy, maybe?
Think about electricity. You've got a lamp, a fan, a computer, a phone, all different devices doing different things.
Right.
But they all run on the same underlying thing, electricity. Brahman is like that ultimate single reality, the universal consciousness manifesting as all these different forms.
Okay, that helps. Atman is the individual spark. Brahman is the whole current.
In a way, yes. And that leads directly to probably the most famous and maybe most mind-bending teaching from the Upanishads.
Which is?
Tat Chivam Asi.
Yeah.
Usually translated as you are that.
You are that. Wow. Okay, break that down. That sounds huge. My individual self, my Atman, is the same as the universal spirit, Brahman.
That's exactly what it means. It's arguably the most profound statement in the Upanishads, famously taught by the sage Uddalaka Aruni to his son, Shvetaketu.
It feels almost radical.
It is. It's not just a nice philosophical idea. It's meant to trigger a direct, transformative realization. Think of a single drop of water in the ocean.
Okay.
It seems separate, right? Individual. But its fundamental nature is ocean water. It's not actually separate. Or think about space. The space inside this room seems distinct from the space outside that window.
Yeah, feels separate.
But is it really? It's all just space, isn't it? Tapitamasi is this powerful declaration of unity, non-separation. It shatters the illusion of being just a small, limited individual. It tells you your true nature is infinite.
So realizing I am that, realizing my connection to everything, what's the point? What's the goal of knowing that?
The ultimate goal is moksha.
Moksha, liberation.
Exactly. Liberation, spiritual freedom, specifically freedom from suffering, freedom from that illusion of being separate, and freedom from the cycle of rebirth, or samsara.
Samsara, that cycle of birth, death, and rebirth we hear about.
Yes, which is believed to be driven by our past actions, our karma. But moksha isn't about going somewhere else, like a heaven after you die. It's about achieving a state of ultimate peace, freedom, and self-realization right here in this life by knowing and experiencing your true, infinite nature.
Okay, this is deep stuff. Who are the people behind these ideas? These weren't just abstract concepts floating around, right? They came from real thinkers, real sages.
Absolutely. These were remarkable individuals, often called rishis or sages, who dedicated their lives to this deep inquiry. People like
Yajnavalkya.
He was a brilliant sage, famous for engaging in these incredibly intense philosophical debates about the nature of the soul, Atman, Brahman. And what's really inspiring is who he debated with.
Oh.
Not just other male scholars, but also his incredibly intelligent wife, Maitreyi, and another amazing woman scholar named Gargi.
Wow, women philosophers back then.
Absolutely. Gargi especially was known for fearlessly challenging the most respected male sages in these huge public debates. It shows intellectual and spiritual pursuit wasn't limited by gender, even then.
That's fantastic. Who else? You mentioned Uddalaka Aruni.
Yes, the one who gave that powerful teaching, Tattvamasi, to his son. A very direct, impactful teacher.
And wasn't there a story about a young boy who questioned the god of death?
Ah, yes, Nachiketa from the Katha Upanishad. A truly compelling figure. He's this young boy who, through a series of events, ends up face to face with Yama, the god of death.
And he asks him.
He bravely asks Yama about the ultimate mystery, what happens after death. Yama tries to distract him with offers of wealth, long life, worldly pleasures.
But Nachiketa wasn't interested.
Not at all. He insisted on knowing the truth about the soul, about life and death. His story just perfectly embodies that Upanishadic spirit of fearless inquiry, that relentless thirst for ultimate knowledge, even in the face of the greatest unknowns.
So these figures, Yajnavalkya, Gargi, Uddalaka, Nachiketa, they were like pioneers of inner exploration.
You could absolutely say that, like the first spiritual scientists or consciousness explorers. They weren't content with just believing things or following rituals blindly. They were driven by this intense need to know, to understand the fundamental truths of existence through direct experience and deep rational inquiry. Their insights laid the very foundation for everything that followed. 2. Paths of liberation, disciplining mind and action.
Okay, so the Upanishads gave us these profound insights, the big picture of reality, Atman, Brahman. But that leads to the question, how do you actually live that? How do you experience it?
Exactly, and that brings us perfectly to the next phase, the development of practical paths of liberation. These are structured disciplines designed to master the mind, purify our actions, and lead to that state of moksha we talked about.
And the first major path we should probably dive into is yoga darshana. Now, for most people today, yoga means, stretching, physical postures.
Right, downward dog and all that.
Yeah, but in its original philosophical sense, it's much, much more than just exercise, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. When we talk about yoga philosophy, we're definitely not just talking about the physical postures, the asanas, though they are one part of a much larger system.
Okay.
The comprehensive philosophy of yoga, which was brilliantly systematized by the sage Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras, probably around 200 CE, is a profound, holistic path. It's about achieving mental clarity, self-mastery, and ultimately that spiritual freedom or liberation.
And his core definition of yoga is famous, right?
It is. It captures the entire essence in just a few words. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha.
Which means
Yoga is the stopping of the whirlpools of the mind.
whirlpools of the mind. I love that imagery because that's exactly what it feels like sometimes, doesn't it? Just this chaotic swirling of thoughts, worries, plans, pulling us everywhere.
Constantly churning, making it impossible to find focus or real inner peace.
So Patanjali's saying that when that mental chatter, that vritti, finally quiets down,
Your true self, that calm, clear, unchanging awareness, the Atman we discussed, naturally shines through. It's like letting the mud settle in a cloudy pond. Suddenly, you can see the clear water underneath.
Okay, so how do we actually stop these whirlpools? How do we settle the mud?
Patanjali lays out this incredibly practical, step-by-step method. It's called Ashtanga Yoga, which means the 8 limbs of yoga.
8 limbs, like climbing a ladder.
That's a good way to think of it, yeah, like climbing a ladder towards higher states of consciousness.
No.
But maybe it's better to think of them as 8 interconnected aspects you cultivate together. Each limb supports and strengthens the others. It's really a holistic lifestyle designed to bring about that inner stillness.
So what are the first limbs? I understand they start with ethics, right? Like a foundation for everything else.
Exactly. The first 2 limbs are absolutely foundational. They set the moral and personal groundwork for mental stability. First, we have yama. These are universal moral disciplines or ethical restraints. And importantly, they're not just for monks or ascetics, they're guidelines for everyone to live more harmoniously, both with others and within ourselves.
Okay, like what kind of guidelines?
Well, the most famous is ahimsa, nonviolence. But it's much deeper than just not physically hurting someone.
How so?
It means nonviolence in thought and word too. Choosing kindness even when you feel provoked. Not judging others harshly in your mind. Refraining from gossip that could harm someone's reputation. Think about it in an Indian family context. Ahimsa might mean choosing not to speak ill of a relative, even if you're really annoyed with them, because you recognize words can wound.
And you realize that inner anger hurts you too.
Precisely. Practicing ahimsa reduces your own inner conflict and agitation. It's directly linked to inner peace. Then there's satya, which is truthfulness, but again, nuanced. It's about speaking truthfully, but also kindly and helpfully. Sometimes the blunt truth can be harmful.
Right. Then asteya, non-stealing.
Yes, and that extends beyond big things. It means not even taking a pen from the office without asking, or borrowing something and not returning it promptly. It's about respecting others' property and boundaries. Then brahmacharya, often translated as celibacy, but more broadly means moderation, especially conserving and wisely directing your vital energy, not wasting it on excessive sensory indulgence.
Okay. And the last, yama.
Aparigraha. Non-possessiveness, non-hoarding. Living with what you truly need, rather than constantly accumulating more stuff. You see this sometimes in the simplicity of traditional village life in India. There can be a real freedom in not being attached to material wealth. The idea is that clinging to possessions creates anxiety and mental clutter. Letting go brings clarity.
Wow. So these yamas are really about how you interact with the world and others, ethically. What's the next limb?
The second limb is niyama. These are personal observances or practices of self-discipline. They complement the yamas.
Okay, like personal habits.
Kind of. First is sacha, cleanliness. Both external, keeping your body and environment clean, and internal, purifying your thoughts and emotions from negativity. Then sentosa, contentment. Finding joy and gratitude for what you have, rather than always craving what you don't. This is such a powerful antidote to our modern consumer culture, isn't it?
Huge, yeah.
Then tapas. Self-discipline, austerity, or that inner fire that helps you overcome inertia or unhelpful habits, like making the effort to get up early for meditation even when you don't feel like it. Svadhyaya, self-study. This means both studying sacred texts or wisdom teachings, and also introspection, turning inward to understand your own patterns, your own mind.
And the last niyama
Is vara pranitana.
Yeah.
Surrender to a higher power or the divine or your own higher self. It's about recognizing you're part of something much larger than your individual ego and letting go of the need to control everything. This can bring immense peace.
So yamas and yamas set the ethical and personal foundation. Now we get to the more commonly known aspects like the physical postures.
Right. The third limb is asana, the postures. But again, in Patanjali's original context, it wasn't about achieving pretzel-like poses for Instagram.
So what was the point then?
The goal of asana was simply to find a stable, steady, and comfortable posture, Sthira
Yeah.
that you could hold for a long time without discomfort or distraction, allowing you to meditate.
Ah, so the posture serves the meditation.
Exactly. It's about mastering the body so it doesn't fidget or ache, so it becomes still and allows the mind to follow. Think of that classic image of a yogi sitting perfectly still in lotus pose. The aim is bodily stillness as a gateway to mental stillness.
Okay, that makes sense. Body steady. What's next? The breath.
Precisely. The fourth limb is pranayama, the science of breath control or breath regulation.
Why is breath so important?
Because your breath is the most direct, tangible link between your conscious mind and your body's involuntary nervous system. Think about it. When you're stressed or anxious, how's your breath?
Short, shallow, fast.
Right. And when you're calm and relaxed?
Deep, slow, even.
Exactly. Pranayama teaches you to consciously control your breath, making it deeper, slower, more rhythmic, which directly calms your nervous system and steadies your mind.
So you can use your breath to change your state.
Absolutely. Even simple practices like taking a few deep, slow breaths when you feel overwhelmed, stuck in traffic, or just closing your eyes and observing your natural breath for a minute. That is pranayama in action. You're using an ancient yogic tool to shift from agitation to calm.
Okay, body steady, breath calm. What's limb number 5?
Pratyahara. This means withdrawal of the senses.
Withdrawal, like shutting down.
Not shutting down, but consciously turning your attention inward. Usually our senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, are constantly reaching out, grabbing onto things in the external world, pulling our minds along with them.
Yeah, like being in a busy market in India so much, pulling your attention.
Exactly. Pratyahara is like consciously deciding to, metaphorically, shut the windows during a storm. You gently draw your attention away from the constant stream of external sights and sounds, allowing your focus to settle internally. It's a crucial step for developing concentration.
Because you can't concentrate if you're constantly distracted by the outside world.
Precisely. So once the senses are drawn inward, you can move to the sixth limb, dharana.
Dharana is concentration.
Yes, single-pointed focus, training the mind to stay fixed on one chosen object without wavering. That object could be your breath, a mantra, a visual image like a candle flame, a spot on the wall, anything.
It sounds like building mental muscle.
It really is. In our modern world with constant notifications and multitasking, our attention spans are often fragmented. Dharana is the practice of rebuilding that ability to sustain focus, to keep the mind from jumping around like, as they say, a restless monkey.
Okay, so dharana is holding the focus. Then what's dhamana, the 7th limb? That's usually translated as meditation, right? But people often think meditation means empty your mind, which feels impossible.
That's a really important point and a common misconception. Thank you for bringing it up. Dhyana, or meditation, is not about forcing your mind to be empty. That usually just creates more struggle.
So what is it then?
It's more like an unbroken, effortless flow of awareness towards that object of concentration you established in Dharana. Think of pouring oil from one container to another. It flows smoothly, continuously.
Okay.
Or imagine watching a river. In Dharana, you might be trying hard to focus on one specific leaf floating by. In Dhyana, you're simply aware of the continuous flow of the river itself, and any leaves or thoughts that drift past, but you're not grabbing onto them or getting swept away. You're maintaining a steady, witnessing awareness without struggle.
So observing thoughts without getting caught up.
Exactly. Observing the flow of consciousness, thoughts, feelings, sensations, without judgment or reaction. It's a state of deep, sustained, effortless contemplation.
And that leads to the final limb, the eighth one, samadhi. What happens there?
Samadhi is the culmination. It's a state of profound absorption, bliss, or union. The sense of a separate I, the ego, dissolves. Only pure, undifferentiated awareness remains.
Wow.
It's the direct experiential realization of that unity we talked about with the Upanishads. A state of boundless peace, stillness, beyond description. It ultimately leads to kaivalya, which is absolute liberation, freedom from all limitations.
Looking back at all 8 limbs, what really strikes me is how incredibly practical and systematic it all is.
Right.
Yoga, in this full sense, gives you real tools. Tools to handle anxiety with your breath, build inner discipline through ethics, and find that deep inner quiet that's apparently always there, underneath the mental noise. It's not just philosophy, it's a complete roadmap for transforming yourself. 3. The rebel sages challenging perdition. Okay, so we've journeyed through the ancient Vedas, the deep insights of the Upanishads, and the very practical, structured path of yoga. But the story of Indian thought isn't just one straight line, is it?
Not at all. It's more like a rich tapestry with many different threads.
So let's talk about some of the other threads, maybe the rebel sages. Thinkers who came along and challenged the existing ideas, maybe even questioned the authority of the Vedas and offered new, sometimes radical paths to liberation.
That's a great way to frame it. Around the 6th to 4th centuries BCE, often called the Axial Age, there was this incredible ferment of spiritual and philosophical questioning happening across the world, and very intensely in India. This period gave rise to powerful independent traditions that didn't necessarily rely on the Vedic framework.
And one of the most significant figures from this era is Mahavira, the founder of Jainism. Tell us about him.
Mahavira is a truly monumental figure, living around 599-527 BCE. And his story parallels with the Buddha's, actually. He too was born a prince, surrounded by luxury.
But he didn't stay.
No. At age 30, he made this dramatic choice to leave everything, his kingdom, his family, all his wealth, to pursue ultimate truth. He underwent years of incredibly intense ascetic practices and deep meditation.
And he achieved enlightenment.
Yes, he attained what James called Kaivalya, which means infinite, perfect knowledge. He became a Jaina, meaning a conqueror, one who has conquered their inner passions like anger, greed, and ego. And his followers became known as Jains.
Okay, so what makes Jainism unique? What's its core belief system? I understand they have a very specific idea about the soul and how karma works, different from maybe the Vedic idea.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Jainism's core worldview is distinct. It believes that every single living being, not just humans, but animals, insects, plants, even microscopic life forms, possesses a pure, eternal soul called a jiva.
Every living thing has a soul.
Yes. And this jiva is inherently perfect, full of consciousness, bliss, and infinite knowledge, like a perfectly bright, luminous light bulb.
There's usually a but.
The but is karma. Jains believe this pure soul gets trapped, obscured, covered over by karma. And here's the really unique Jain perspective. They see karma not just as the consequence of actions, but as actual physical, incredibly subtle particles.
Physical particles, like dust.
Exactly like dust, or maybe like sticky soot. These karmic particles are generated by our thoughts, words, and actions, especially those driven by passion or negativity. They flow in and literally stick to the soul, covering up its natural brightness, weighing it down.
So the soul gets covered in this karmic soot.
Precisely. And it's this accumulation of karmic matter that keeps the soul bound to the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Samsara, experiencing suffering.
So the goal in Jainism is to clean the soul.
Exactly. Liberation, or moksha in Jainism, is achieved by stopping the inflow of new karma particles and, crucially, by actively shedding or burning off the layers of old karma that have already stuck to the soul. It's a process of meticulous purification.
Okay, that's a vivid image, cleaning the soot off the bulb. How does one actually do that? What are the practical steps? I've heard about the 5 great vows.
Yes, to purify the soul and stop accumulating more karmic dust, Jains, especially monks and nuns, adhere strictly to 5 great vows, the Mahavratas. And the first one is the absolute cornerstone, the very heart of Jainism.
Which is?
Ahimsa, radical nonviolence.
We heard about ahimsa in yoga too. Is it different here?
It's taken to an even more extreme level of meticulousness in Jainism. It's nonviolence in thought, word, and deed, extending to absolutely all forms of life, even the tiniest invisible microbes.
How does that play out in practice? It sounds incredibly difficult.
It is incredibly demanding, especially for monks and nuns. Think about a contemporary example. Maybe a Jain monk you might see in India, someone like Vishal, whom I read about. He might walk barefoot, carefully sweeping the path in front of him to avoid stepping on insects. He might strain his water to avoid harming microorganisms. He eats only once a day, accepting only food that is offered freely.
Wow.
And here's the really striking part about ahimsa in thought and word. If people shout abuse at him, he might simply smile. Why? Because he sees them not as enemies, but as other souls burdened by their own negative karma. Reacting with anger would just attract more negative karma to his soul. So he practices forbearance, compassion, non-reaction. It's about meticulously protecting his own soul's purity and avoiding harm to any other being.
That level of self-controlling compassion is breathtaking. What are the other 4 vows?
They all support and flow from ahimsa. Second is satya, truthfulness, speaking only what is true, but also ensuring it's beneficial and uttered kindly. Third is asteya, non-stealing. This is very strict, not taking anything that isn't freely given, even something tiny like a paperclip, or taking credit for work you didn't do. Fourth is brahmacharya, chastity for monks and nuns, or faithfulness and moderation in sensory pleasures for lay people. Controlling desires conserves energy for spiritual practice.
And the 5th?
Aparigraha, non-possession or non-attachment. For monks, this means owning virtually nothing, maybe just robes and a begging bowl. For lay Jains, it means minimizing possessions, living simply, and cultivating detachment from material things. The idea is simple. The less you own, the less you have to worry about, the less attachment you have, and the less karma you generate related to possessions. It frees the mind.
Jainism also has this really interesting philosophical idea called Anekantavada. Can you explain that? It sounds relevant today.
Oh, Anekantavada is incredibly profound and, yes, extremely relevant, especially in our world that often feels so polarized and certain of its own truths. It literally means non-one-sidedness, or the doctrine that truth and reality are complex and always have multiple aspects.
Multiple aspects.
Yes, no single perspective, no one viewpoint can capture the entire truth of anything. The classic analogy used to explain it is the story of the 6 blind men and the elephant.
Ah, I think I know this one.
Right. Each blind man touches a different part of the elephant. One touches the leg and says an elephant is like a pillar. Another touches the tail and says, no, it's like a rope. Another touches the trunk, it's like a thick snake. The ear, it's like a fan.
Each one is right based on their limited experience.
Exactly. Each description is true from that specific limited perspective. But the elephant itself, the whole truth, is much bigger and more complex than any single description.
So Anekantavada teaches intellectual humility.
Precisely. It fosters immense tolerance, open-mindedness, and respect for different viewpoints. It reminds us that what we perceive as the absolute truth is often just one angle. We should be willing to listen to and learn from other perspectives because reality is multifaceted. A really valuable lesson for today, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. A much needed one. And what are the 3 jewels in Jainism?
Ah, yes. The Ratnatraya, or 3 jewels, which are considered essential for achieving liberation. They are right faith, Samyak Darshana, conviction in the Jain teachings, right knowledge, samyak jnana, correct understanding of the nature of reality, soul, and karma, and right conduct, samyak charitra, living ethically according to the vows.
And they all have to work together.
Yes, Jains emphasize they must be cultivated simultaneously and in balance. Like the 3 legs of a stool or 3 wheels of a cart, you need all of them for stability and progress on the path to moksha.
So, thinking about its modern relevance, beyond the specific vows, how does Jainism influence people today?
Its deep reverence for all life is a powerful inspiration for ethical living. It strongly influences practices like vegetarianism and veganism. It promotes very high standards in business ethics. Honesty, fairness, integrity are paramount. And critically, its core principle of ahimsa naturally leads to a strong sense of environmental responsibility and care for the planet and all its inhabitants. It really offers a path of living gently, mindfully, and ethically in the world.